Morning, everyone. It's a minute after the hour. I propose we start. I see that some people are still logging on. Welcome to the webinar series on the value of water in Canada. My name is Roy Brouwer. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Institute. Before I introduce the speaker of today, I want to acknowledge that I participate today in traditional territory of the Neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. Our main campus, as you can see on this map, is situated on the Holdeman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Indigenous Initiatives Office. And I invite you to take a minute to consider where you are on the territories that you are. Thanks, as I mentioned, to join this webinar series. Before I introduce Steve Brown, the speaker of today, just a housekeeping notice. Please use the Q&A box instead of the chat for asking your questions. You can ask your questions at any point during the presentation. We'll try to get to your questions at the end of Steve's talk. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Steve to you. Steve Brown is a Senior Water Resources Engineer at the Stantec Waterloo office. He's responsible for leading and advising on surface water resources assignments in Ontario and across Canada. Steve specializes in various aspects of water resources engineering, including sub-watershed and drainage studies, environmental assessments, stormwater management planning and design, stream rehabilitation works, and that's what he's going to talk about mainly today, floodplain management analyses, water budget calculations, and erosion and sediment controls. His water resources expertise is recognized by the fact that he has prepared expert witness evidence on water resources issues and through his registration and approval for drainage and hydrology design for highways by the Ministry of Transportation. Steve is also active in industry as a past president and current board member of the Ontario branch of the Canadian Water Resources Association. And as I mentioned, he's going to talk about stream restoration today. Steve, we're very happy to have you with us today. I'm happy to hand over the floor to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Roy. Appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. And while I get this started to share my screen, wishing everybody a happy Valentine's Day. Not sure how I was lucky enough to get the Valentine's Day date, but here we are. Is that screen showing through okay there, Roy and Julie?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's not. Okay. Well, hang on a second. Is anything showing?
No.
Okay, try this again. How
There we
about now? There we go.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right, there we go. Thanks very much again for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here to talk about stream restoration as a tool for water asset management today. Just a quick roadmap on where we're going through the day. So a little agenda. I'll do a quick introduction. Roy's already introduced me, but I'll talk a little bit more about myself and Stantec. We will talk about water management and how it has been approached over the last several decades and where it is going in the future. And then I want to talk about the city of Kitchener and using their stormwater utility as a model or a tool going forward for how water assets are managed. And then I'm going to go through 3 examples of projects that we have done, stream restoration projects that reflect some of those assets and how those are managed and implemented. And then we'll have a quick summary, and then we should have enough time for some questions and answers afterwards. All right, so this is me. Roy already introduced most of this. I have a wide range of water resources expertise, been in the industry for a number of years, worked both with public and private sector clients. Most of my work has actually been in Ontario, but I do have experience, I think, in most other provinces at this point. So, and it is kind of interesting to see the differences across different jurisdictions. I think Roy also mentioned I'm a past president of the Ontario branch of the Canadian Water Resources Association, and currently I'm a board of directors member for the same group. Stantec is a Canadian consulting company. We started as a one-person firm in Edmonton back in 1954. We've grown to about 28,000 employees in 400 locations across 6 continents. So that's a pretty huge growth over about 70 years, I guess. Our headquarters are actually still based in Edmonton, though, in spite of the fact that we are a global company now, which is kind of neat as a Canadian. We are engineers, designers, scientists, project managers. We work across many different business lines, including community development, buildings, environmental services, mining, energy, transportation, and water. So, wide range of topics and projects that we can get involved with, which keeps life interesting. Stantec has had an office in the Kitchener-Waterloo region for over 30 years now. And our current office in Waterloo, which is where I am based, is actually just north of the university, and I can actually see the university out the window behind me. The Water Institute is quite close to home for me. At Stantec, we take pride in our long history of being part of the communities, and some of that pride is you'll see in the presentation today, because these projects are all that we're featuring are all in the Kitchener area, so very close to home for me. All right, so getting into the meat of things here. Water management. Within the context of water management, traditionally, dominating approach has been to direct or divert water away from people and development as quickly as possible. It was seen as a nuisance particularly in the urban landscape. So our water management projects and facilities are typically hidden. They aren't really obvious. They're hidden away. They're tucked away where people don't see them. And they're static engineered interventions, so like concrete channels. And that's an issue. The picture on the left is sort of an example of that. This is actually City of Los Angeles, so it's Los Angeles River, and it was taken a couple of weeks ago during their atmospheric river event. So you see the big concrete channel on the left, and it's quite full of water. But what I noticed out of the picture is that it's really isolated. Like you've got a major highway on one side and development on the other side that sort of backs onto it, but there's really no way for the public to see or interact with it. And that's sort of typical of viewing water in the urban landscape as a nuisance. So although this type of structure and facility can be effective in the short term, they're often really expensive. Imagine the cost of building that concrete channel would be pretty significant. And they don't tend to solve the problems. They tend to move them. They displace them, move them downstream or whatever. But so they sort of work and sort of don't. They require significant ongoing operation and maintenance costs, and failures can be pretty significant, have pretty significant consequences when something engineered like this does fall apart. The approaches that have been traditional are typically work against the forces of nature rather than with them, resulting in continual conflict and continual upgrades required to maintain the structure and its integrity, and to address changes in either the watershed above it or in a changing climate. So there are ongoing operations and improvements are needed to make sure these traditional measures remain relevant. What we've started to see in the last, few years or decades is a switch in that approach to water management, water assets. It's begun to change to see them more as assets and having some intrinsic value rather than just as a nuisance they were seen as historically. Features are increasingly being viewed as providing positive benefits to a community. And what we start to see is things like the photo on the right, where the river valley is integrated into the urban structure. You've got access and the ability for people to see and interact with water in a way they really haven't been able to as part of the urban environment over the last few decades. So while there's more access and ability to appreciate them, also see that there's also an ability to have decreased capital operation and maintenance costs. There's increased climate resilience with a green solution as opposed to a gray one, and often a reduction in liabilities, whether that's flooding or erosion or other issues. So we're starting to see a shift in water management and water assets. And on to the next slide. There we go. So one of the common features of water asset projects is that there's often a multitude of co-benefits achieved while addressing sort of your primary objective. And those benefits sort of integrate into different ways within the surrounding community. And I know this is a long list on the screen, and I'm not going to read through it line by line. That's not the purpose. The intent here is just to highlight that, hey, there's a wide range of different benefits that are associated with water projects, from the obvious ones like flood protection or drainage improvements or whatever, to maybe ones you don't expect, like health and well-being. There's an article last week I saw that said, walking in nature has the ability to allow you to focus better, as opposed to walking in other locations. The ability to increase resiliency and react to changing climate and other conditions. And being increased in real estate values are different benefits that fall out of some of these other projects as sort of an extra benefit that wasn't really the intention originally when you go into it. So recognizing that stormwater assets have value, how are they managed and implemented? So in an urban setting, historically, stormwater and surface water projects have been funded through general taxes. This differs from a drinking water or sanitary assets, which are funded through a utility structure, where users pay according to how much they use. So when I use a liter of water in my house, I pay a utility charge to the city for that water. So by per liter of water, I pay a certain amount. Without that type of structure, though, what you see with water projects and their funding is that they come from the same pot as all other sort of general services that municipalities have to provide, from roads to parks to trails to recreational facilities and so on. And this makes it a real challenge for water projects in terms of implementing and funding them, because their assets that we talked about have been traditionally been hidden and not really acknowledged for the values that they provide. So if you were to ask somebody, hey, would you like a new pool in your neighborhood, or would you like us to clean out some stormwater ponds? The answer is probably going to be a new pool, just because people don't appreciate the value of some of these water assets. So a more recent tool in the toolbox is a stormwater utility. Even as recently as 2010, there were none in Canada. Currently, there are 24 across the country and at least 10 in Ontario, and more in the process of being developed now, so that number may be a little bit out of date. But instead of getting funding from general taxes, then, the utility provides a funding stream from users, in this case, those who contribute stormwater runoff into the municipal system. So that funding stream then allows the municipality to undertake a specific suite of projects. So where you had a drinking water utility, they would be doing projects like upgrading water intakes and water treatment and distribution systems. In a stormwater utility, you just do different projects, different types of projects. And what I'm going to do now is work you through the City of Kitchener, their example of the stormwater utility, to give you some context and some concrete information for how that has happened. So for anybody who's calling in from further away, Kitchener is located about an hour west of Toronto. It's the largest city in Waterloo Region and one of the fastest growing urban centers in Ontario. Like many parts of Canada, there was a significant development boom after World War II and decades of rapid growth, residential growth well into the late 1970s. So great big long period of expansion. And particularly as it relates to surface water, the philosophy was what we talked about. It was an inconvenience or a nuisance and needed to be channeled away from development and people as fast as possible. So what you wind up with then is a lot of natural water courses that have been turned into concrete channels and destroyed any sort of natural habitat or any equilibrium that existed on the landscape prior to that time. So that brings us to today and the current state of affairs, which is a lot of gray infrastructure and some significant flooding risks, particularly in some of those old historical floodplains. So the map on your screen is City of Kitchener, highlights the areas that are serviced by stormwater facilities, call them modern stormwater facilities, I guess. And the list of assets there is, I thought interesting just to say, hey, there's a lot of these things. There's a lot of stuff in the stormwater asset bucket. And those are increasingly being recognized as providing value. So the replacement value for all the city's stormwater assets from 2020 is a little over $1 billion. That's billion with a B. That's a big number, and the City of Kitchener is not a huge city by any stretch. So if you expand that across the province and across the country, there's a lot of assets here that we're talking about. Water courses, since that's what we're going to focus on here, account for a little over a quarter of those stormwater assets, about $280 million. Again, a fairly big number. And you know, one of the things that's eye-opening is that there was a value of 0 assigned to it, as little as 5 or 8 years ago. So that sort of reflects that change in philosophy and approach to water assets that I was talking about. So how did Kitchener come to implement a stormwater utility? It started with Victoria Park Lake. Victoria Park was constructed in 1895 on Schneider Creek, an area which at the time actually was outside of the city of Kitchener. It was in the country, which is ironic since it's right in the middle of downtown now. The lake was sort of the centerpiece for the big park development all around it. So really a nice area. It's attracted a lot of people over the years, and something the city was quite proud of. In the years since it was constructed, the city grew a lot around it, so that it's now in the middle of the city. Many of the water courses were channelized and converted over that time period. And the city came to get into a routine where they had to clean out the lake every few years. The most recent clean out or retrofit was 2010, 2011. And when we started talking about that with the city, they were shocked and surprised to find that the construction value of that was over $10 million. And most of that was related to sediment removal. At the time, a typical road reconstruction project cost about $2 million for the city. So what the city found is that they had about 5 road construction projects all of a sudden that they had to do that they had no funding for. So they needed to make some decisions on how this type of thing could be managed. And where they came to was between the need for the project and there's a pretty good public support for the cleanup of Victoria Park Lake. That turned into the catalyst for creating that new funding stream, the first impervious area-based stormwater utility in Canada. So the need to protect that investment of Victoria Park Lake was what really moved the city into doing a stormwater utility. To give you a little sense of scale, the photo on the screen is mid-construction on that last clean out. For a sense of scale, if you look carefully, there are a couple of construction workers standing on top of the sediment that has not yet been removed from the lake. That's how much was removed from the entire lake. So that's why it cost $11 million. So really significant. So once that project was done, the city started looking at upstream projects that would protect that investment. I had to find that low or no maintenance solution to minimize how much sediment comes down to the lake so they don't have to go through this every 15 years. They identified a number of concrete channels upstream that are very efficient at funneling water and sediment down into the lake, and those represented an opportunity to reinstate sort of the natural sediment transport regime and protect the downstream function of the lake. It had a significant co-benefit too of creating a lot of new fish habitat in areas that didn't have any before. So that was the germination of the idea of moving into a stormwater utility for the city. This photo, by the way, is Victoria Park after the reconstruction, different bridge, but same area. So the city initiated the stormwater utility and became one of the first in Ontario in 2011. And what it allowed is the cities to undertake a range of water-related projects, from simple drainage improvements to stormwater cleanouts to regular supporting, monitoring, and modeling projects, as well as a number of new capital improvements. And that's what we're going to talk about today, so the creek rehabilitation and naturalization projects that go into, or they get funded by the stormwater utility. So the utility's been in place for 10 or 15 years almost now. The annual budget is up to about $30 million a year. So that has seen some significant growth since it was started. And the city has observed some real benefits to the utility structure. And the first one they mentioned is funding equity. The stormwater charge or stormwater fee is based on how much impervious area you have on your property. So you have a bigger impervious area, you pay more as a stormwater fee. So that attributes the amount of water that you're contributing to the system to this fund that does retrofits, does improvements to manage those water assets. It also allows the city to recognize site improvements. So if you undertake measures on your property to minimize or reduce or improve the drainage off your site, then you can apply for and receive credits from the stormwater utility to reduce the amount of fee that you pay up to about 50%. So again, gives some incentive to people who are contributing to the fund to mitigate that contribution as well. It also gave the city the ability to leverage those known utility dollars to gain other levels of funding. So they've been quite successful in getting both provincial and federal funding grants to expand and do more work within the stormwater utility. So they've been quite good at that. Another benefit is that the city has control, the ability to customize the infrastructure implementation. They don't have to wait for another project to come along that they can piggyback on. They have their own stream. They can do planning. They can prioritize, which has been allowed them to be much more efficient as well. They also control the communication strategy, and the city has actually been quite active in explaining and trying to get out in front of the public what the values are of the stormwater utility, of the stormwater features and functions, to try to educate people so that they are aware of some of the values that are provided by this infrastructure. And they also have the ability to create policy and control implementation work, so they can demonstrate levels of service and justify the need for changes to stormwater fees, for example. So this is something the city has been working on for a number of years, and at this point, I'm going to move into some project examples. These examples, the intent here is to demonstrate how different projects and different water management objectives were achieved through the stream restoration projects. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. They're all from City Kitchener, and they were all funded through the stormwater utility. The first one is Schneider Creek in Sulsinger Park. This was one of the very early projects after the Victoria Park Lake construction was completed. So this was some of the concrete channels that they identified and focused on to see if they can improve sediment management upstream before it gets to the lake. The photo here is the bottom end of that system right at Westmount Road. You can see it's a pretty extensive concrete channel that was present before construction started. There were about 3 kilometers of concrete channel in the project. The construction was completed and removed about 2 of them. And the primary objective, like I said, was protection of Victoria Park Lake, managing that sediment load from the watershed before it gets to the lake. Really important co-benefit, though, was the natural habitat creation. The removal of 2 kilometers of concrete channel, like you see here, and replacement with a natural channel actually created a whole lot of fish habitat through this area, and let the city establish the first municipally owned habitat bank with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. That was the first project that was included in that. There are also benefits and advantages for recreation in terms of park and trail use, as well as flood protection. So a bunch of co-benefits there, but the primary one was sediment management. So a little background. Sediment delivery was really efficient, as we've talked about. City had been dredging Victoria Park Lake about every 15 years for the last half century or so. Most recently, the early 80s, 1996, and then the 2010-2011 version. And the reconstruction of the lake included a forebay that was designed to contain sediment up near the upper end of the lake and limit the frequency that they had to dredge and clean the entire lake. So it was estimated that the forebay would be dredged about every decade or so, and that the lake would only need to be dredged about once a century, which would result in a considerable cost savings. So you don't get that $11 million bill every 15 years. So the image on the left, the map there shows the study area circled in red. You can see it's right in the middle of an urban setting. There are about 3 kilometers of concrete channel in there. You can see the red star is actually Victoria Park Lake, to give you context of where we are. And the concrete channels run right down to the lake, so they're really efficient at funneling flow and sediment down there. So the intent was that by removing the concrete, natural sediment equilibrium could be reestablished, thus protecting the lake and the infrastructure investment that the city made downstream. So this is our before and after shot. The photo on the left there is an aerial view of the lower part of Filsinger Park before construction. You can see the nice concrete channels there. The trail network is also visible as well. It's actually hard to tell them apart, as they're both hard structures. The image in the middle is immediately after construction. You can see the trail still exists, but the concrete channel has been removed and the channel plan form has been altered to be more of a natural meandering pattern. And the image on the left is a drone photo looking up one of the branches of the creek there after the restoration. Again, you can see the natural patterns and some of the vegetation starting to take hold as well. And just as construction was finishing, so it was actually late November 2014, there was a really significant flood. There was an early snowfall that year, something we haven't seen much of this year, and then a big rain event. All the floodplain areas were inundated for a couple of days. We were actually a little nervous about what we were going to see when we went back out there, but when the water finally receded, we went back out and were very pleased to find that there was virtually no damage at all. A few minor things, but nothing significant. But one of the biggest observations was that across most of the floodplain, there was 5 centimeters or a couple inches of sediment that had been deposited everywhere. It actually was so significant we had to reseed some areas that hadn't germinated yet because they were buried too deep. They weren't going to sprout. So pretty clearly, it demonstrated that the design was very efficient at helping to remove some of that sediment that would have all wound up down in Victoria Park Lake eventually. Got a series of before and after pictures just to give you some context here and some idea of what it looked like. This is the upper end of the system looking at Fisher Hallman Road, just at the very start of construction. You can see the nice concrete channel in there. You can see the park areas around the edges. Very urban setting. And this is the sort of in the process as we're going through construction. Same location, looking at Fisher Hallman Road again. Floodplain was restored actually as we went. So instead of constructing all the channel and going back and doing all the plantings, we actually restored as we went. So as you look at this picture, the areas closest to the culvert are the ones that were constructed first. And you can see that the grass is already showing through. It's already starting to be green. We've got some plantings established and everything else. As you get closer to the camera, the grass seed hasn't germinated yet. You can still see the erosion matting. But that's why it hasn't worked its way there yet. So just touching back to our project objectives here, sediment management was one of the primary things. So we've got a wider floodplain for sediment to settle on, provide some additional flood protection capacity. And the channel is actually narrower and has a bunch of habitat features that weren't present before. This is what it looked like at the first spring after construction. So again, same locations, a little bit further away from the culvert, but same general area. Again, you can see the wider floodplain is present here. It's growing in quite nicely with lush vegetation there. Channel is narrower. We've got some habitat structures in there that accommodate a lot of fish, and starting to stabilize quite nicely. This is this very downstream end of the reach as well. This is downstream of a confluence of 2 branches, so this is much wider. This is the widest extent of concrete that we had. It was quite significant, quite a wide channel as well. The arrow on the screen here is existing pedestrian bridge at the time that was replaced with a longer one, but at the same location. So that just gives you a bit of a context for the next couple of pictures and the after views. So there's the first spring after construction. See the new pedestrian bridge there, the same location as the old one. And again, we've got a wider floodplain. We've got natural areas, so it's not going to just convey the sediment and flows all along. It has the opportunity to capture and settle stuff. Channel is narrower, it has habitat features, and the trail has been obviously maintained and enhanced a little bit as well. This is the exact same location last June, actually. I took the picture. You can see the pedestrian bridge there, but it's getting hard to see for all the vegetation. See, the channel has narrowed up further as the vegetation has taken hold. still got the trail and access there. So it's developing and maturing quite nicely through the entire system. It's actually one of the few spots you can actually see the stream now. Stuff has grown in quite thickly. So just revisiting our objectives here. Sediment removal was the primary one. So our evidence during construction was pretty clear that it has the ability to remove sediment. The forebay in Victoria Park has been dredged once since construction. 2018 cost a little under $400,000, which is a far cry from that $11 million. And the lake doesn't require any cleanup, so it seems to be working effectively from that perspective. Fish were observed through the new channel everywhere, and virtually as soon as we put water in the channel, there were fish, and not just a couple of fish. There were fish everywhere, all kinds of them. It was quite amazing that they appeared so quickly. The park trails were also protected and enhanced. I had a lady come up to me, had our formal ribbon cutting after construction was completed. There had been some public opposition to the project, and she was one of the ones that we had talked to beforehand who didn't want to see the construction happen. And she said to me, if I'd known what this was going to look like when you started, I would never have objected to it in the first place, which tells me that the new aesthetics were much appreciated and welcomed. It's also quite rewarding to have her seek me out to tell me that. And the flood protection has been maintained. The flooding is contained within the park, so nothing, no external areas or private property gets flooded through this reach. So we seem to have hit all our various objectives. Second project that I'm going to highlight is Idlewood Creek. This one is one of the few remaining cold water streams in the city of Kitchener. The lower reaches were channelized with gabions, those are the rock baskets. And there was a dam created that created a small online lake, and that was blocking fish passage from moving upstream. The Grand River, the photos that you see on the screen there is the Grand River, and that dam was blocking fish passage up into the upper reaches of Idlewood Creek, and they wanted that removed. And also had recreational benefits as well, in that this is a link on the Walter Bean Trail that runs along the Grand River through Kitchener, and this was a sort of a gap in that trail system, so it's able to be connected. So our before and after photos again. The before on the left, you can see the channel comes out quite straight to the Grand River. You can see the gabion baskets a little bit from the air photo as well. And the one on the right, you can see the new channel that's been constructed. This photo was taken sort of right after construction finished, because it's still quite fresh. You can see the new channel and the pedestrian bridge that's been installed there. These are our on the ground pictures again. You can see the gabion baskets lining the channel here. The channel's quite straight, doesn't have much in the way of habitat. And you can see the concrete dam that existed there. The dam had actually been drained previously because there were structural issues with it, so there wasn't a pond there when we were working, but the dam was still blocking passage. And that's what it looked like afterwards. The arrow was about the same location as the original dam. You can see that that's been removed. The stream channel has been narrowed up quite significantly and planted, so the vegetation is now overhanging the water, and we've got the public bridge as part of the trail is now present as well. That's a photo of during construction work. The channel is actually being worked on. The old gabion line channel is still present at this point, but they're working at removing that. And that's what it looks like, same location, roughly the same view from this past spring. You can see the channel has grown in nicely and naturalized. The pedestrian bridge is present linking up the trail systems. And another thing that got added through public consultation was the public was interested in getting a canoe launch down to the Grand River, and that's what you see at the bottom right-hand corner of this picture. That was constructed just after the channel works were done. So again, going back to our objectives, dam removal, it was removed. We've reconnected the stream system from the Grand all the way up. And the spring after construction was completed, we found young of the year minnows, newly hatched minnows of a species that was not present in Idlewood Creek, but was present in the Grand River. We found them about 2 kilometers upstream, which tells us that those species were able to navigate up the channel and spawn successfully up in Idlewood Creek. We've got a new bridge and trail system connected, and also we had a canoe ramp. canoe launch ramp that was incorporated into the project. So again, we seem to have hit all of our various objectives. A third project, I'll go through this one relatively quickly. Montgomery Creek, it is located in Wilson Park in the city of Kitchener. The channel had historically been straightened, but not concrete or gabion lined, but had pretty poor definition, around 800 meters long. There was an exposed water main in the Vanier Boulevard crossing, which needed to be repaired. Pedestrian crossing was pretty poor and regularly flooded, making our trail connections difficult at times. And there were some drainage issues in adjacent areas that we wanted to try to protect. So our before and after air photos again here. Before on the left, see a nice straight channel that runs right in between the trail and the road. And on the right is shortly after construction. You can see the channel pattern has shifted fairly significantly to a much more natural looking pattern. That's a picture of the exposed water main in Vanier Culvert. Not only does it partially block the flow, it also is quite susceptible to damage if any debris is brought down during a storm. There is a potential for it to be either damaged or broken entirely. So that was repaired. That's what the channel looked like before. Fairly narrow, poorly defined, not great habitat. And that's the pedestrian bridge that they wanted replaced because it's right down on top of the stream. So anytime the water came up even a little bit, it got flooded, forcing people to go around. Also a safety issue there as well, that it's not easily accessible and not a great bridge structure anyway. And that's what it looks like afterwards. That's the new pedestrian bridge, obviously, roughly the same location as the old one. This was taken about 1 year after construction completed. And, if we go back to our objectives here, infrastructure protection, the water main was removed and protected. So that was completed, and you can't see that here. Our trail crossing was greatly improved. We've got a new channel, which is on the left there. It's narrowed up, much more natural, and got better habitat conditions. The pool actually on the right is an outfall pool. There's a little storm sewer that comes out from the road there. So we've got some energy dissipation as well as some additional habitat there within the valley. There's an air photo of the finished work, and you can see the pedestrian bridge there about 2/3 of the way up the screen. And that's what the new channel looks like. Got much better habitat and conditions in it. Vegetation is appropriate, and the structures under the water are also good. One of the other things we did with this project, there were 2 major storm sewer outfalls that came into Montgomery Creek right here. They were really hidden away. You didn't know they were there unless you went looking for them or you knew they were present. So we've pulled them back a little bit and opened them up so they're more visible, more accessible. Not that you want people down in there, but again, it gives you an appreciation for what happens. So you can see the trail that runs right along the edge now, so that they're much more visible to the public as you're around and in the system here in the park. The other major addition was improved trails. The main connection that runs parallel to the stream was maintained, but we added some areas for other sort of a side trail there with benches and areas to sort of stop and linger. There's areas to get down to the stream as well if you wish, which was not really available before, and seems to have been well appreciated by the community as well. This park is always really busy. Anytime I've been out, it's been full of people. So again, going back to our objectives, infrastructure protection, that water main was removed. So that's no longer an issue. So that was satisfied. Our channel is much better now. There are more fish present and in better conditions. We improved local drainage and neighborhood flood protection where we needed to, and the new pedestrian bridge allows that trail connection to be available more often than it was before, and in a better state, easier to access. And that is it. Just a quick summary here, just stuff we've talked about. talked about the value of stormwater assets, how the recognition of those has changed from a traditional sense of water being a nuisance to now it being an asset and a benefit to a community. Introduced the stormwater utility and used City of Kitchener example for how that has come to be and what types of projects it can do. We talked about stream restoration and how it is recognized and used to manage and improve water assets, in this case streams, within the City of Kitchener. And I think that is a tool that will continue to be used both in the City of Kitchener and elsewhere. And the other highlight here is that there are multiple benefits from any typical stream restoration projects beyond just the singular reason to do the project initially. There's always a range of other benefits that accrue as well. And with that, I think I will pause and have some time for some questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Steve. Everyone online, please enter any questions you might have for Steve in the Q&A box, and then we can get to that. While you are maybe thinking of your questions, let me kick it off. Steve, thanks so much, as I said, for your presentation. I don't think we've ever seen such a colorful, beautiful imagery than what you just showed us. It looked really very, very beautiful.
I like to work with photos.
You like to work with photos. This one is very spectacular as well. The one that you have here now.
This is actually Columbia Lake.
It's amazing. Yeah, I recognize. Is it open text there in the back?
Yep, it is.
Yeah. That looks amazing. Looks almost magical.
It does.
Steve, so thank you for the presentation. So the objectives of the projects that you showed us are multiple. But I was wondering a little bit to what extent there is possibly any monitoring going on of the effectiveness of the, if possible, the effectiveness of the interventions of the restoration projects, and possibly maybe also any follow-ups in terms of when it comes to recreation. Is there any monitoring of increased use of the areas? The areas look fantastic, so I cannot imagine that people wouldn't love to walk around there. And you also showed that there is a boat lounge in place. So my question is about how effective has it been in maybe dealing with some of the stormwater issues, and to what extent there is possibly any monitoring or follow-up going on with respect to some of these other objectives that these restoration projects serve at the same time.
Yeah. I think in general, we can say they are extremely effective at achieving their objectives. The monitoring that does happen is often centered around specific things like water quality, which we can measure. So again, that you can show changes in constituents in the runoff and so on. And one of the example of Filsinger Park and the sediment management was one that we've sort of been able to, I don't know if I want to say quantitatively measure, but the fact that there hasn't been a need for a clean out in Vic Park Lake in the time since it was constructed suggests that the sediment delivery has been slowed rather significantly. So, those types of things we are able to measure and look back on. Some of the other stuff like uses of the parks in the areas is difficult to measure, but I know anecdotally that anytime that I'm out, anytime anybody else is out, there are always people around. People tend to people are just, they gravitate towards water. I know I am, maybe that's just me. But so the fact that we bring water into areas where people can see it and interact with it, I think is a really positive thing, and something that is welcome within all the various communities that these projects have been completed in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was also wondering, when you were saying that there was a local resident being so happy about the outcome after you did the restoration project, but protesting against it beforehand. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? I was just curious, why would people protest against something like this?
That was one of the really early lessons that we learned, Roy. The Filsinger Park project was one of the earliest ones. where that became apparent in that I think one of the things that we didn't do as well as we could have was explain what it is we were going to have at the end. You say, oh, it's a stream naturalization project. Great. I know what I mean by that, but the general public doesn't necessarily understand what that's going to look like, what that means. The issue on Filsinger that was creating much of the concern was the cost. The construction cost was in the order of $3 million. And the objections were centered around, hey, could we spend $3 million another way? So I think we've changed a little bit how we have approached these projects since then to spend a little more time and effort trying to explain or illustrate what it's going to look like, what the intent is, what we want to try to accomplish than we did in the early ones. So that was one of the lessons that definitely came out of that project.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense as well. I was wondering indeed whether the costs were maybe an issue. Maybe another question related to your first answer, or the first question also, is there any environmental impact assessment associated with the design or the evaluation of these projects, or are they're too small that they don't? That an environmental impact assessment is not necessary for them?
It depends on the project. Some of them have gone through that EA type process. They go through that before we get to the design and construction stage. So I wasn't focusing too much on that today, but yes, there is definitely a process that goes through and looks at what we could do, what the alternatives are that might achieve sort of the same objectives, and then evaluating or balancing those to determine a preferred approach to get there. And usually the stream restoration approach, it doesn't always come out ahead, but it usually scores fairly well because it does achieve a bunch of goals at the same time.
Yeah, and that involves public consultation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
very
the
much.
public is involved. The public is involved in the design, as you also demonstrated with the boat launch, I guess.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the outcomes of Idlewood, where people said, hey, we can get down to here, can we get a canoe launch into the Grand River, because there's actually a fairly good amount of canoeing that goes on through there. So it provides the public with another opportunity, another location to get to the river. And that was one of the feedbacks that was received through those consultations.
Yeah. Do you have the impression that as a result of having these projects and actually showing results in a relatively short period of time, you have pictures where the next spring or the next summer, you already had quite a wild growth of vegetation. Do you think that those examples have helped to increase public support, policy support, municipality support for these kind of projects?
Very much, very much. It's we sort of see it as momentum building. You see a project and wow, that looks really nice. And then there's another project and yeah, that looks nice again. And you're right, they do turn nice quite quickly after construction is finished, much quicker than you might think. But yeah, that is something that we see, and Filsinger was sort of the only project that was done by the city that year. Now, partly with the utility, but partly because of the momentum that has been created, is they're doing multiple projects a year, where different places across the city. And I've just highlighted the ones that I've worked on.
Yeah, I was wondering a little bit about how quickly you see this, how you actually see vegetation. I was involved in some floodplain restoration projects in the Netherlands, and there it takes really a long time before you have quite a nice wilderness coming back, years before you actually see something. And the first years is just nettles and grass, and so people might actually get disappointed if they don't really see these results quite so quickly as you manage to show them.
Yeah, it depends on scale too, what you're trying to do. The longer time frame you need to get trees to mature and so on, but you can get at least a ground cover, and some of the lower vegetation can establish very quickly afterwards. The trees, there's no way to accelerate them. You just got to wait, but you put them in place and you put the conditions in place, and they will grow.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from Caroline Hill-Smith. And she says that along Spencer Creek here in Hamilton, there are dams that hold back stream flow for Christie and Valence Lake. These dams create the lakes that provide income for recreation and yet have impacts downstream. How do you reconcile, is her question, removing them and the loss of revenue for the Hamiltonian or the Hamilton Conservation Authority for recreation at these facilities, yet have a value in flood prevention and sediment mitigation?
That's a really good question. It's something we do deal with pretty regularly. Anytime there's any kind of a dam or impoundment, there's a really strong desire usually to keep it because of the aesthetic recreational values that it provides, as well as the flood protection and other reasons. What you get into with those types of situations is a bit of a balancing act, and in certain situations there may be more value to the habitat versus the flood control, for example. So if it's not providing a huge amount of flood control, then maybe that's not as important a component of the structure, and maybe that would swing you more towards a removal. We've had them go both ways, where we've kept some dams and we've removed some dams. Depends on the magnitude, depends on the location, what else is associated with it. So it's hard to answer the question in isolation. You've got to look at it within the context of the site and the location, and what benefits it provides and what opportunities it removes. So
yeah, is there any cost benefit analysis associated with these projects? Like if you have a case like this where the damage avoided as a result of flood prevention could actually offset some of the losses in revenues in recreation, and sometimes it's also just a matter of compensating the ones that
yes.
that suffer some of the damages.
Yes, maybe you can move some of those recreational values to a different location nearby, for example, and therefore, it's not fully lost. But yes, we often try to look at this. It's difficult to actually quantify, in dollars, what the value of a natural channel is. You can do it a little bit in terms of flood prevention, like you mentioned, or revenue from trail access or something like that, but it's difficult to put a dollar value on that, so it makes the comparisons very difficult. They're usually done more qualitatively, in terms of a relative importance of this function versus that function. Something that we could probably do better.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box, so I've also run out of questions myself. I propose we stop here. Thank you so much for giving the talk. It was extremely interesting. It was great to see what Stantec is doing in this area. Thank you, Steve, and thank you those participating today online. We hope to see you again in a month's time on the 13th of March. We will have Marilyn Fair. She's an IJC commissioner, and she's the founding director of the Center for Indigenous Environmental Resources, and she will talk about safeguarding values through collaborative water governance. So hopefully see you on March 13th, again at the same time between 12 and 1 p.m. Thank you all for participating. Have a great rest of the day. And thanks once again for being with us here today. Many thanks, Steve. This was fantastic.
Thanks very much. It was good. Enjoyed it.
It was really good. It was really excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day. Run to your meeting.
I'm going to run to EC5 now. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye-bye.